Hello and welcome to Newsweek South Asia, your one-stop destination for in-depth analysis of security challenges, regional conflicts, and the evolving threat of terrorism. Let's take a look at the headlines first. India unprecedented global blitz exposes Pakistan's terror ties. India slams Pakistan at NWSA over baseless allegations, accuses it of gross hypocrisy. Pakistan faces outrage after suspected drone strike kills 4 Pashtun children. India is no longer just defending its borders, it is now defending global peace. In the aftermath of the gruesome Pahalgam terror attack that left 26 civilians dead, India launched Operation Sindoor, a precision military offensive that dismantled terror camps inside Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. But New Delhi didn't stop there. In a historic move, India sent 59 parliamentarians across party lines, divided into 7 high-level delegations to 33 countries with a clear agenda to hold Pakistan accountable on the global stage for its decades-long export of terrorism.
On May 7, 2025, just 15 days after the terror strike in Pahalgam, the Indian Armed Forces executed a highly coordinated and surgical offensive, Operation Sindoor. Multiple terrorist launchpads, training camps and logistical hubs in Pakistani-occupied territory were destroyed. Targets included key facilities of Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba, responsible for carrying out some of the deadliest attacks on Indian soil over the last 2 decades. This was a message of resolve, a response that was strategic, swift, and uncompromising. Soon after the military success, India turned to diplomacy. A coordinated global outreach program was launched by the Ministry of External Affairs. 7 multi-party delegations comprising 59 Indian MPs were dispatched across continents, from the Americas to Asia, from Europe to the Gulf, to rally international opinion and expose Pakistan's deep-rooted terror links. These delegations are engaging with foreign governments, national parliaments, think tanks, media organizations, and human rights groups to highlight Pakistan's repeated use of terrorism as a tool of state policy, its sheltering of UN-designated terrorists, and its complicity in cross-border attacks against civilians.
The central idea behind this objective, this is a political mission. We want to make a strong outreach to the world to convey our resolve to fight terrorism. We want the world to come together to fight terrorism tooth and nail in all its forms and manifestations.
The first stop for one of the delegations was the United Arab Emirates, a key partner of India in the Gulf region. Indian MPs met with UAE's Minister of Tolerance and held comprehensive talks with defense and foreign affairs officials. The United Arab Emirates reiterated its zero-tolerance stance on terrorism and expressed support for India's efforts to combat extremist networks.
Our commitment toward Indian national security is non-negotiable. India is a strategic partner. It's not only with the government, it's with the people, it's with the nation. We have a history of relationship with India. We want to take it to the next level.
In Tokyo, Indian lawmakers were welcomed by Indian Ambassador C.B. George and briefed extensively on India-Japan strategic coordination. The delegation held discussions with Japanese think tanks, policymakers, and foreign ministry officials, underlining Pakistan's dangerous use of proxy terrorism and India's right to self-defense.
Members of Parliament from different political parties came together with one voice: zero tolerance to terrorism. And the message was loud and clear from the Indian side. To our Japanese friends, to the diplomatic community, to the media, they went everywhere with one voice. This is a great achievement.
In Russia, Indian parliamentarians met with senators and foreign policy advisors in Moscow. The Russian side unequivocally condemned the Pahalgam terror attack, expressed solidarity with the Indian people, and reaffirmed its support for India's counter-terrorism efforts.
I think we are happy when we go back and when we leave Russia. We know that Russia stands with us. And Russia is a very important country globally. And the message that Russia understands India and stands with India is very important to us.
One of the most high-profile delegations was led by Congress MP Shashi Tharoor, who travelled to New York and Washington DC. Speaking at the Indian consulate, Tharoor said India had exercised strategic restraint for decades but could no longer stay silent. India hit hard and hit smart, he declared.
We're just sending a message to terrorists. You started, we replied. If you stop, we'll stop. And they stopped. There was an 88-hour war. We look back on that with a great deal of frustration because it needn't have happened at all. Lives have been lost. But at the same time, we look back on this experience with a steely and renewed sense of determination. There has now got to be a new normal. No one sitting in Pakistan is going to be allowed to believe that they can just walk across the border and kill our citizens with impunity. There will be a price to pay, and that price has been going up systematically.
The delegation also engaged with US lawmakers and policy institutions, emphasizing that Pakistan's state complicity in terrorism must invite tangible international consequences.
India's message has already resonated strongly across global power centers, from Washington to Tokyo. But the diplomatic drive doesn't stop there, as India's MPs span out across regions often overlooked in traditional foreign policy circuits. From Latin America to the Gulf, the aim is clear: to build a broad-based global coalition that isolates Pakistan diplomatically and morally for its continued sponsorship of terror. Let's now take you to Latin America, the Middle East and beyond, where India's outreach is gathering momentum.
The Tharoor-led team did not stop in the US. They also reached out to Latin America. In Guyana, the delegation held a high-level meeting with President Mohammad Irfan Ali, who strongly condemned terrorism and voiced complete solidarity with India.
Terrorism and extremism has no place in this world. Terrorism and extremism is against every aspect of human dignity, and we reject it in every shape and form, and we believe that everything must be done to ensure that terrorism and extremism is defeated at every front.
In Panama, MPs met Assembly President Dana Castaneda, who publicly supported India's anti-terror mission. Addressing the Indian diaspora in Panama, Shashi Tharoor exposed Pakistan's decades of terror support and asserted that India's patience had run out.
Pakistan has chosen a policy of enabling terror. And not just enabling, but creating terrorist establishments, financing them, training terrorists, equipping them. There have been examples in the last 20 years of attacks in New York, in London, in Madrid, in so many different parts of the world, which have been blamed provably on Pakistani terrorists or terrorists trained in Pakistan and brought to these countries. This is the sad reality we are facing today.
Another Indian delegation led by Bajayant Panda visited Bahrain, where they met parliamentarians, influencers, and Deputy Prime Minister Sheikh Khalid bin Abdullah Al Khalifa. The discussions focused on shared threats of terrorism and India's role as a stable, democratic, regional leader. MP Asaduddin Owaisi, part of the delegation called Pakistan a failed state, exposing its growing economic dependence on terrorism as a strategic tool. The parliamentarian from Hyderabad, Asaduddin Owaisi, strongly called for Pakistan to be placed on the Financial Action Task Force grey list again.
When Pakistan unleashed whatever it had, no amount of damage happened in the mainland India. Yes, in the Poonch area, we know what has happened. But the air defense system, what has been said by the government in the media is that all our technology, all our warfare was able to stop whatever was thrown from a failed state like Pakistan. Our government has taken all the steps to protect the life and limb of every Indian, and this government has made very clear. Next time you take up this misadventure, it will be beyond what they are expecting.
In France, parliamentarian Ravi Shankar Prasad led another multi-party team. They engaged with French parliamentarians, business leaders, and the Indian diaspora. Prasad emphasized that while India continues to seek peace, it will not tolerate terror or provocation. The delegation presented dossiers on Pakistan-based terror networks and their recent infiltration attempts. Europe's role, they said, is vital in cutting off financial and diplomatic oxygen to rogue states using terrorism as policy.
The Honorable Vice Chair of the Defense Foreign Affairs Committee, along with all her colleagues in the Senate, in this majestic building, has only one word to say. We are together with India in the fight against terrorism. And Pakistan has also suffered, and they totally agreed that France and India, nay, the whole democratic world, need to speak in one voice in the fight against terrorism emanating from Pakistan, supported by the state of Pakistan.
Delegations also visited Singapore, South Korea, and Qatar, where they engaged with local media, strategic think tanks, and diplomats. The Indian message remained consistent. Pakistan's terror networks pose a threat not just to India but to the entire civilized world. India's bold diplomatic offensive following Operation Sindoor marks a paradigm shift in the way democratic nations respond to terrorism. Gone are the days of reactive statements. New Delhi has merged military precision with diplomatic strategy, exposing Pakistan on every front: political, economic, and moral.
India has once again called out Pakistan at the highest diplomatic forum, the United Nations Security Council, exposing Islamabad's long-standing role in exporting terrorism across borders. Citing decades of cross-border terror, including the 26/11 Mumbai attacks and the recent barbaric killings of civilians in Pahalgam, India has demanded global accountability. In a searing rebuttal to Pakistan's propaganda, India reminded the world that the real threat to civilian safety comes not from conflict but from state-sponsored terrorism. Here's the full report. Terrorism has today emerged as the gravest threat to global peace. It strikes at the very foundations of democracy, freedom, and human progress, threatening not only nations but the very future of mankind. India, one of the worst hit victims of cross-border terrorism, has endured decades of violent attacks, orchestrated and backed by its hostile neighbor, Pakistan. But India is no longer just a victim. It is now a global leader in counter-terrorism efforts. working in concert with the world's major economies to dismantle terror networks and expose their state sponsors. At the recent session of the United Nations Security Council, India once again turned the spotlight on Pakistan. Addressing the international community, India's permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador Parvathaneni Harish, issued a stinging indictment of Islamabad's role in supporting and sheltering terror outfits. He described Pakistan's participation in the debate on the protection of civilians as a mockery of the forum's principles, calling it an affront to the victims of terrorism across the region.
India has experienced decades of Pakistani-sponsored terrorist attacks across our borders. This has ranged from the horrific 26/11 attack on the city of Mumbai to the barbaric mass murder of innocent tourists in Pahalgam in April 2025. The victims of Pakistani terrorism have been predominantly civilians, since its objective has been to attack our prosperity, our progress, and our morale. For such a nation to even participate in a discussion on protection of civilians is an affront to the international community.
India's permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador Parvathaneni Harish, didn't hold back in his address. In a scathing statement, he accused Pakistan of not just exporting terrorism, but also willfully endangering civilian lives. Citing a recent cross-border shelling incident, Ambassador Harish revealed that the Pakistani army deliberately targeted Indian border villages earlier this month, killing more than 20 civilians and injuring over 80 others. He further stated that the religious sites, including gurudwaras, temples and convents, as well as medical facilities, were intentionally attacked, underscoring Pakistan's utter disregard for humanitarian norms. Calling out Islamabad's duplicity, Ambassador Harish declared, "A nation that makes no distinction between terrorists and civilians has no credentials to speak about protecting civilians." Calling out Islamabad's duplicity, Ambassador Harish declared, "A nation that makes no distinction between terrorists and civilians has no credentials to speak about protecting civilians." He dismissed Pakistan's participation in the UNSC debate on civilian protection as gross hypocrisy and part of a larger pattern of disinformation.
Earlier this month, the Pakistani army deliberately shelled our border villages, killing more than 20 civilians and injuring more than 80. There was intentional targeting of places of worship, including gurudwaras, temples and convents, as well as medical facilities. To preach at this body after such behavior is grossly hypocritical. Let us be clear. Protection of civilians should not serve as an argument for protection of UN-designated terrorists. The international community must come together on zero tolerance for terrorism and calling out those who sponsor and defend it.
Hostilities along the line of control ended after both sides held Director General level talks on May 10th. But India has made it clear ceasefires and diplomacy cannot be a substitute for meaningful, irreversible action against terrorism. Until Pakistan takes tangible steps to dismantle its terror infrastructure, peace in the region will remain elusive. India has also urged the global community, including the UN and FATF, to intensify pressure on Pakistan, which remains a safe haven for groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, despite repeated international warnings and designations. Pakistan's so-called war on terror has once again exposed its true face. One not aimed at eliminating terrorism, but at suppressing and brutalizing its own people. In yet another horrific incident, at least 4 innocent children were killed and 5 others injured in a suspected drone strike in Mirali, North Waziristan. The strike, which locals allege was carried out by the Pakistani military, has triggered mass protests and renewed global scrutiny of Islamabad's systematic targeting of the Pashtun population under the guise of counter-terror operations.
As the world's attention remains fixated on regional security threats and geopolitical rivalries, a silent war continues to rage in Pakistan's northwest against its own people. Earlier this week, a suspected drone strike in Mir Ali, a town in North Waziristan, claimed the lives of 4 innocent children from a single family and left 5 others injured. The victims were between the ages of 5 and 8.
Daidepora, Mir na dehshatgardi khwashawi. Mir aman pasand khalaki, Allah de pora Mir bal bach maaf ka. Udna lodi watan mein ta pravartan lo pashe ton na so ukdal. Nera khoya taraf ta tare kanashta Mir so ki कीमत दौलता की करता de targli. बच्चों में वड़ बच्चों में तयशी दी देवर मुता बयान रोजे बेगराता खुदाई दे पर लश्की हाल बंद में राख मुका काने भी पदाना हुआ तरफ तमीर तरह लियारस्ताना.
While Pakistan frequently markets itself to the global community as a partner in the war on terror, the reality on the ground tells a different story. Instead of targeting extremist groups, Islamabad has consistently deployed drone strikes and military force against civilian populations, particularly the ethnic Pashtuns in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and the former Fatah region. These communities, once strongholds of tribal culture and autonomy, have now become laboratories for drone warfare, surveillance, and forced militarization. Each time the target is framed as a terrorist hideout. Each time the victims are children, women, and men with no ties to militancy. And each time the Pakistani state walks away without accountability.
Actually, they are using the Pashtun areas, particularly the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, as a laboratory to test their weapons. It's not for the first time that they have attacked the innocent Pashtun people, particularly children and women. But we have confirmed reports that more than 32 drone attacks have been conducted only in North and South Waziristan and in Tank areas of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa.
Afridi further alleged that under a state-sanctioned program, more than 55,000 Taliban leaders and their families were resettled by the Pakistani state into Pashtun majority areas. These Taliban operatives, once strategic assets of the Pakistani army, are now being rebranded as threats, only to justify further militarization and violent crackdowns.
We have already informed, especially the United Nations and international community, that what they call the terrorists, they have been brought to our areas, the Pashtun areas, under agreement by the state of Pakistan. They brought more than 55,000 Taliban leaders and their families, under agreement to these areas, and now they are telling us that they are terrorists. So I think it's a proxy war. The Taliban are the proxies of the Pakistan army, and they are just playing a game to kill innocent civilians, to capture our areas, our land, because there are huge minerals in these areas.
Indeed, the Pakistani military's activities in these regions have led to the mass displacement of local communities. Entire villages have been razed, tribal elders silenced. Youth movements like the PTM violently suppressed. Pashtuns have long accused the Pakistani government of using military operations to target civilians under the guise of counter-terrorism. The Pakistani government claims that these operations aim to dismantle terrorist groups like Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, but the Pashtun community has borne the brunt, with over 6 million people forced from their homes. Thousands remain missing, and many families are left in limbo as they search for loved ones caught in the crossfire between the military and militants.
In Muzaffarabad, a region of Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, government-imposed ban on local stone crushing plants has triggered widespread hardship. Officially, it's a move to enforce environmental regulations, but for hundreds of families, it means a sudden loss of livelihood. Construction work has come to a standstill, and in a region already reeling under soaring inflation, many are now struggling to even afford a roof over their heads. Our report brings you the ground reality. Despite the genuine concerns over air pollution from stone crushing plants, the government's response has been both reactive and careless. Instead of regulating dust control mechanisms, they imposed a sweeping shutdown without warning, alternatives, or public consultation. This negligence has led to widespread unemployment. Meanwhile, critical issues like the lack of operational standards, proper equipment maintenance, and long-term environmental planning continue to be ignored, leaving local communities to suffer the consequences.
ये हुकूमत ने बंद किए हुए हैं तो वजह तो अब सबको पता है माशाल्लाह इस चीज़ को सब जानते हैं कि जो भी वजह है इसको ओपन है ये कोई छुपी लुकी बात तो है ही नहीं है तो इस बारे में गवर्नमेंट को भी पता है जो जज साहिबान हैं उनको भी पता है तो जो हवा में उनको भी पता है तो जो मशीनों में पानी नहीं लग रहा है वो खुश्क चल रहा है उनकी जो गिरद गुबार वाकई उससे हवा मुतासर होती है तो मशीनों वालों को चाहिए कि वो जो जहाँ जहाँ उनको पानी का बंदोबस्त हो सके वहाँ पे प्लांट लगा के यहाँ पानी अगर दूर है तो पैप के ज़रिए से पानी ला के उस गिरद गुबार को वो काबू कर सकते हैं.
On the economic front, the ban has dealt a heavy blow to Pakistan-occupied Jammu Kashmir's already fragile economy. With no alternative employment measures in place, families that once relied on daily wages from construction sector now find themselves stranded. The sudden nature of the decision has left local communities scrambling with growing frustration over the lack of planning, support or meaningful intervention from those in power.
8 से 10 लाख आदमी बेरोजगार हो चुका है यहाँ आज़ाद कश्मीर में. रमज़ान में लेबर के लिए पेमेंट ही नहीं थी ठेकेदारों के पास. तमाम कंस्ट्रक्शन के काम भी बंद हो चुके हैं. ब्लॉक फैक्ट्रियाँ भी बंद हो चुकी हैं. लोगों के प्राइवेट जो मकान थे वो भी बंद हो चुके हैं. हमारे ना वज़ीर आज़म साहब यहाँ ऐसे हैं, अल्लाह उनको हदायत दे, वो तो इस बात से देखते ही नहीं है. तो हम अदालत ही से अर्ज कर सकते हैं कि वो इस पर कोई नज़रसानी फरमाएं.
The ban on stone crushing plants in Muzaffarabad reveals a troubling intersection of environmental neglect and economic hardship. Local residents are urging the judiciary and government to act swiftly to address the crisis, reviving livelihoods while ensuring environmental safeguards. Without urgent intervention, Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir faces the risk of deeper social and economic decline, endangering the well-being of countless families and the region's future stability. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Newsweek South Asia. We'll be back next week with more news, views and analysis from the subcontinent. Meanwhile, do keep writing to us at nwsa@nin.com. This is Shivangi Mishra signing off on behalf of the entire team of Newsweek South Asia. Goodbye and take care.